So the impetus for this series of videos is the following. I want to make the very interesting but slightly confusing plot of the fourth entry in the Fatal Frame series more digestible and comprehensible for myself, and hopefully for you as well. We'll be doing deep dives into specific characters as well as key elements of the plot like the Rogetsu Kagura and Moonlight Syndrome. Based on how much material there is to work with from in-game documents, I will definitely be splitting this up into multiple parts. But don't worry, unlike some TikTokers, I won't insist that you like for part 2 because I don't give a shit. There will be a part 2, a part 3, hell, maybe even a part 5,000, whether you like it or not. I'll also be correcting and clarifying anything from earlier videos as I carry on and learn more about this incredibly intricate plot. We will follow up this video with some character studies as well in order to discuss each main character's particular relevance to the plot, so look forward to more videos. But for now, let's start with the setting. Taking place prior to the events of the first game, Fatal Frame 4's setting is Rogetsu Isle, and the in-game documents give some pretty interesting reasons why this place is such a cesspool of paranormal activity. For some reason, the moon holds a powerful influence over both the living and the dead who inhabit Rogetsu Isle, and every 10 years, a portal between the realm of the living and the dead opens up, coinciding with a lunar eclipse. We learn a little more about the moon's influence from Professor Aso's Note 2, which states, quote, "The sun represents the outer form of things, and the moon the inner. Believing that the soul is still connected to the underworld after the body dies, they say the moon is a symbol of that world as well as a gateway into it," end quote. So long ago, the inhabitants of Rogetsu Isle developed a ritual known as the Rite of Descent, and for as long as anyone can remember, the Tsukimori Shrine Maidens have guided the rest of the residents through said ritual in order to help restless souls cross back over to the hallowed realm. The necessity for this comes from the aforementioned high level of paranormal activity and the danger of a phenomenon referred to as resonance occurring that comes with it. We learned from a document called Legend of the Moon Song that, quote, "At times, disaster may befall the moon, the worst bringing resonance and that with it blossoming. Being so disaster in the moon, the maiden playeth the moon song to pacify the troubled moon and souls, allowing said souls to return to the hallowed realm," end quote. Though just a couple of lines, there's a lot to unpack here. The first thing to note is the concept of the lunar melody or moon song. This is something that naturally occurs within all people, something that Dr. Aso confirms in his Rogetsu Kagura Chronicle. He says that everyone has an innate lunar melody that causes, quote, "the souls of the living to appear like bundles of noise called moon sounds, which are different for everyone," end quote. The dead are attracted to these sounds and seek them out. As these moon sounds tie directly to the moon and the moon holds a special influence over Rogetsu Isle, the sheer magnitude of adverse effects that can result from the dead commingling with the living that can be observed on Rogetsu Isle is referred to as resonance, which is a term for the transference of Moonlight Syndrome symptoms between the living, as well as the cause of budding in a living person who sees a blossom face. To counteract these effects, those who possess a specific type of lunar melody can be used as vessels and organs in the Rite of Descent to guide lingering souls back to the hallowed realm by performing in the ritualistic dance. The Tsukimori Shrine Maidens would traditionally help with the selection of vessels and organs. This ritual is crucial to warding off disaster caused by the blossoming that Legend of Moon Song alludes to. Of primary importance to the success of this ritual, though, is the vessel, who wears a special mask, quote, during the Kagura to become the point of contact between the living world and the world of the dead, the underworld represented by the moon, end quote, taken from Professor Aso's Note 2. The vessel's ability to carry out this role successfully, we will see shortly, is of the utmost importance in order to ward off the disaster Legend of the Moon Song refers to. This is largely due to the fact that, during the ritual, people can actually enter into a trance-like state where their souls leave their body and mingle with the souls of the deceased. This especially happens at the climax of the dance as confirmed by Dr. Aso in Rogetsu Kagura Chronicle. More relevant to blossoming, he goes on to say that, quote, "Some also suffer from a condition known as moonlust. At the time of the Kagura, the moonlust may be caused by the souls not returning completely after becoming one with the spirits during the trance state of the Kagura," end quote. This is actually why all participants of the Kagura, both spectators and performers alike, are required to wear ritual masks. These masks were thought to be attuned to the souls of the dead, which would allow for a harmonious return of the living soul to its body, thereby preventing moonlust and the eventual blossoming because, as Dr. Aso is quoted as saying in Fragment of an Unsent Letter, quote, "The ultimate shared experience is death," end quote. The masks worn by spectators and performers of the Kagura then allow for harmonious interactions between the intermingling souls due to them being constructed with a specific purpose to connect to the underworld. Moonlight Syndrome, it would seem, is caused by this process not going as it should, and this is ultimately tied to identity, or more specifically, a lack of ability to identify, which is why memories are often forgotten by people suffering from Moonlight Syndrome. If moonlust causes a person's lunar melody to become broken or distorted, that person's identity slowly starts to become divorced from them. The distorted face that others can see in a blossom person is a manifestation of this. And we know of two especially bad days where the rite of descent in no way went as it should have, the first of which is documented in Coming of the Day of Tranquility. The Day of Tranquility is quite the misnomer, as it's actually a day of disaster and death. The tranquility refers to how peacefully the people who died on this day actually transitioned from the realm of the living to the dead. But make no mistake, a shit ton of people died. This catastrophe was brought about by Soetsu Yamotsuki's attempted construction of the Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, which we learned actually, quote, hath no form, end quote. This is from Secrets of the House of Yamotsuki. This mask was reserved for the faces of the deceased. Obsessed with seeing the hallowed realm while yet alive, Soetsu attempts to construct a corporeal mask of the lunar eclipse that he claims is the true mask of the lunar eclipse. But his descendant, Soya, attributes the failure of the ritual and resultant catastrophe to the imperfect construction of the mask. Soetsu at the time, however, thinks this mask, if worn by the vessel during the rite of descent, will be able to put a stop to resonance once and for all. He reveals in Chronicle of Soetsu Yamotsuki that, quote, the only way to seal the blossom person is the true mask of the lunar eclipse. Placing it thereon and so performing the rite of descent will send their spirit back to the moon and cause the resonance to cease. End quote. As we learn from the plot of the game, Soetsu instead brings about the first Day of Tranquility. We get confirmation of this from the Coming of the Day of Tranquility, in which it says that, quote, the rite of descent being performed, the vessel wearing the mask of the lunar eclipse fell into a deep sleep and then did awaken and blossom. And yea, the blossom vessel did resonate and cause many to blossom also, till the island entire was aught but blossomed faces, end quote. Yikes. Didn't go quite as planned, did it? From Dr. Aso's Rugetsu Kagura Chronicle referenced earlier on, we know that moonlust can cause this blossoming effect, and it's further amplified here by the fact that the vessel actually blossomed. The vessel is the principal performer in the dance who takes on the majority of the spiritual burden of having the souls of the deceased pass through her and onto the hallowed realm. If that nexus of spiritual energy blossoms, well, it's no wonder shit got real fast. And that's how the rite of descent becomes taboo, and the vast majority of documents referring to it and to the Mask of the Lunar Eclipse are destroyed. But after 2 generations of not performing this important ritual, the spiritual buildup that plagues the island is immense. The Rugetsu Kagura comes on the scene to alleviate some of this, as well as offer a little help to anyone suffering from Moonlight Syndrome. The ceremonial mask maker Soetsu Yamotsuki, who crafted the Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, is thought to have caused the ritual's failure and all hell to break loose. And let's just pause to admire the cool connection. Ruka Minazuki, the main protagonist, is actually a descendant of Soetsu Yamotsuki on her father's side. Fast forward to 1970, 10 years prior to the events of the game, Shigeto Haibara, the director of the hospital, his son Yo Haibara being investigated by Choshiro Kirishima for the possible murder of 3 of his Tokyo patients, and Soya Yamotsuki, Ruka's father, attempt to revive the rite of descent. Now these guys are technically the bad guys, especially Yo Haibara, but some of their hearts are in the right place. Dr. Haibara's wife died from Moonlight Syndrome, and his daughter Sakuya now has a pretty bad case of it. Dr. Haibara's only wish is to revive the rite of descent, as he sees it as his only hope of ridding Rogetsu Isle of the pestilence that is Moonlight Syndrome forever. We learned from Director Haibara's Note 1 that the good doctor believes that, quote, in order to conquer Moonlight Syndrome, we must be brave enough to step over taboo boundaries, end quote. Given his daughter Sakuya's worsening condition, he also stresses the urgency of reviving the taboo rite of descent before it's too late. Dr. Aso's visit on the island was actually fortuitous then, for these 3 men as the camera obscura becomes pivotal to uncovering key elements of the rite of descent ritual, namely the design of the Mask of the Lunar Eclipse and the musical composition of the Moon Song. And this is how our 5 girls come to be considered missing, 3 of them being among the cast of playable characters. Dr. Haibara selects our heroines, Ruka, Madoka, and Misaki, to be among the organs for the rite of descent that will be performed in secret with his daughter Sakuya as the vessel. Our girls are eventually discovered by our other playable character and Spirit Stone flashlight wielder Choshiro, but their memories have been lost already. It's important to note that 2 of the original 5 have since met tragic ends, and the remaining 3 girls believe that they will meet similar fates if they don't return to Rogetsu Isle and reclaim their lost memories. If going through the game on your own, you were as confused as I was and having a hard time keeping the events of the plot straight, I hope this video proves helpful. And if you're still confused, don't worry. I'll be producing more videos of deep dives into each character's specific connection to the Kagura and Moonlight Syndrome. Until then,